me in a deep thought.
Sorry?
Put me in a deep thought. What has happened to us in the near future? If we might talk about regional dynamics and all the changes in higher education, and we can bring it to Asia, specifically Hong Kong or Southeast Asia. As an outsider and as a visitor, as a scholar and as a practitioner, what do you observe? What could be done to straighten the position? That's a regional question, but from what you said, what could be done to stabilize or sustain the model or the dynamics of empire striking back to colonization, to colonizing powers?
I mean, here in a sense we come back to this issue that I was talking about conformity. Because if it does seem to me that if universities in Hong Kong, China, insist on competing according to the sort of Western model, then that's going to continue this drift to conformity. What I would like to see, I have to say, is higher education really drawing on the cultural traditions of the locality, developing its educational thinking from the history and cultural thought within those own traditions, without becoming parochial. And it does seem to me that that's very important. And whenever I come over here, I'm really quite struck by the fact that so many academics do want to do that. Now, I'm not at all sure whether that's what the policymakers want, or whether they too would like their universities to be little or big or even better Harvards, or Oxfords or Cambridges or whatever. But it seems, I mean, I would prefer if that wasn't the route that was taken, but that regions discovered their own notion of excellence within higher education from within their own cultural traditions and from within their own heritage of thought. You know, so that would be my hope. And as I say, I think that's what a lot of individual scholars and groups of scholars and practitioners are trying to do that I talk to. But I don't know quite how that, I don't know to what extent there is a tension between that, between the aspirations of that kind of practice and the what are seen by policymakers, managers, politicians as the kind of bureaucratic necessity to compete in the global market. I mean, what I'm saying is you could still compete, but kind of compete. Regions could compete on their own terms rather than have those terms set. I'm very aware that I'm coming in as an outsider and I don't want to make any assumptions that is happening. But I imagine there are those sorts of tensions. And I imagine they're difficult for everybody to cope with because clearly politicians and policymakers and principals want their university to be the best in the world. But I think it's very important, to use your phrase again, to draw on the local dynamics, to draw on the local and regional resources to draw on the cultural heritage that is there. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's my main argument for the last few years that I'm making in my field, in my scholarship. Do you think, though, the Western scholars or Western higher education professionals would be really open to other traditions, to other cultures and heritages of thoughts, to the extent that they would allow it to become part of their Western tradition, which has been primary in colonizing one for a few hundred years?
Well, most of these Western scholars, this category that you refer to, I mean, most of them would see themselves as good liberals, and good liberals, of course, would say, absolutely, yes, we're out. You know, we want to recognise the other person's point of view, acknowledge it. But of course, liberals also have a vested interest in their own liberalism. So there will be tensions there as well, and there would be in my own bones, I feel a tremendous commitment to the idea of the liberal university, and I have difficulties with. I think I have difficulties with any kind of faith-based university. I have to say, including institutions in the 6 or 7 institutions of higher education in England that have a Christian foundation. I have some problems even with that. But we've kind of got to learn to talk across these ideological divides and see what kind of structures come up, what kind of institutional ideas come up. I mean, we cannot do this thing called higher education unless we associate with one another in some sort of civic fashion. And the form that civic association has taken in the West has been the university as we understand it. All I'm saying is that there might be that the civic association, which is a necessary condition for us to learn together, may take different forms in the next few years, and we can see. We can see some foreshadowing of that in mega universities, in big federal structures. Perhaps also in, those are all big examples. There might be small community instances of higher education and collective learning that will emerge as well. But that's what I find quite. I think that's what I find quite exciting. The idea of the forms and structures that the new associations will take that are a necessary condition for us to learn together. You can only go so far in learning on your own. There's a point at which, in some way or other, you've got to connect, and that's what institutions are for. Institutions are supposed to facilitate connection. Unfortunately, sometimes they actually are dysfunctional and get in the way of interconnection. But in which case, you've got to come up with new kinds of institutional formations and structures that are going to facilitate this interconnectivity and capacity to learn together. And I think that's what's exciting for somebody like me to come to somewhere like this.
In one of your books, you bring about, talking about learning, you bring about the notion of interpretive pedagogies. Interpretive pedagogies, and you argue for learning to be central point of higher education, institutional functioning.
Yes.
And you ask the question, how can we shift the focus to that particular aspect that is pivotal for the goals and reaching goals of higher education. talking about the integrative pedagogies, would you observe some new pedagogies or something which actually, or strategies that would make learning the center of the higher education globally, despite of the structures which emerge? Or are there new forms of learning, or just elaborate on learning?
Yeah, I didn't in that book, and I don't think I would want to sort of suggest innovations or strategies. What I would like to highlight is in a way the necessary tension between practice and institutional structure. Sorry, I'm back onto institutions again. But the philosopher Alistair MacIntyre has a nice explanation of this in terms. He says chess players need chess clubs. It's good if you're a chess player and you enjoy the practice of chess. Then it's good to have an institutional structure within which to do that. But the club can't exist without the practice. The practice could actually exist without the club, but the club is there for the practice. And I think that's terribly important in terms of universities as well. It is as if pedagogical practice has almost been sidelined. In many universities, there's now, somewhere right on the edge, some little unit called the teaching and learning unit, or whatever. And all I'm saying, what part of the argument of that book is that we've actually got to bring practice right back in the centre and build it up again. Our places are about pedagogy in the broadest sense of the word. They're about teaching and learning. They are about the practice of teaching and learning, and everything else has got to flow from that and follow from that. So I do feel we've kind of lost sight of that. I don't particularly want to determine how that practice should be conducted. I think if you genuinely put teaching and learning at the centre, it will find its own way through. It's when it has bureaucracies imposed upon it that it actually becomes something other than teaching and learning. It becomes, at worst, indoctrination. It can become rather dry and boring training. It can become sort of routine